Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Ali Ingersoll. North Carolina is filled with history, like 150-year-old trees, abandoned towns. You don't have to travel very far to find something interesting to explore. WRAL digital journalist and resident historian Heather Leah joins me today to talk about some of her favorite spots. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I always love doing these.
So with summer coming along, kids being out of school, what are some of, let's say, two of your favorite spots that have particularly interesting history here?
Yeah, so first of all, so hard to narrow it down to two because there are dozens. But there are two that I've done recently, and I haven't talked about them on the podcast yet, so I thought I'd start with those. So recently, I went to go see the Barnstormer murals, and those are in Cameron, so that's only about 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. I just want to say it from the hilltops for these small rural North Carolina towns. They have the coolest history, the coolest stuff to see, and they don't get a lot of visitors because people don't realize they're going to the bigger towns and the bigger cities or the more traditionally well-known tourist places. But these places have these little hidden secrets. So I'm going to talk about the Barnstormer murals and then a really cool ghost town that you can explore in the foot of the mountains.
Okay, great. So let's start with those murals and tell me about them. And since this is a podcast, obviously people are not looking at the photo. So what exactly do they look like?
Yeah, so I will be honest with you. I had heard about these murals for years. They're called the Barnstormer murals. And, you know, they're one of those places that were on my to-do list, but I just hadn't got a chance to check them out. So maybe a couple months ago, I decided I'm going to go look at them. And I was just blown away. They were way cooler than I even imagined they would be. So what they basically are back in the 90s at the turn of the century. That's hard to believe that the 90s are the turn of the century now. But there was a young artist who had grown up in Cameron, North Carolina, Cameron having a population of under 200. And he moved to New York City and became a big city artist, and he got all these artist friends from all around the globe. So we're at Y2K, and people are afraid the whole world is going to explode when the computers turn to the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And in that sense of dread and foreboding and anxiety, he wanted to come back to pastoral North Carolina, where he grew up, where he was a preacher's boy, and he wanted to bring these artists from all over the world to come paint in small town North Carolina. And the people of Cameron had just never had such an experience of, you know, so it's a smaller town. They didn't get these types of big art projects, and they painted these kind of urban murals, you know, graffiti, street art, New York City style stuff, on these pastoral landscapes, on these old tobacco barns that are rotting and decaying, and they have these beautiful landscapes behind them. And the people of Cameron just absolutely loved this experience. Unfortunately, it's been a few decades since then, and now these pieces of art are actually starting to fall apart. We're starting to lose them. Several of them have been destroyed by, you know, hurricanes and things like that. So there are still quite a few left, and they're definitely worth going to see.
I think that's probably so interesting to see kind of the rustic barn, right? Mm-hmm. And then those bright pops of color. It's probably just such an interesting kind of mix of textures and color.
It is. And now nature is starting to take over too. So these murals that are bright and colorful. There's one that's got like two robots, and they're like robot farmers, and they're standing there. They kind of look like American Gothic. And then there's one that's like a firefighter with and it's like this, the silhouette of either a firefighter or a soldier, and then it's got the American flag behind him. There's a lot of Pokemon, because that was the 90s. There's a lot of stuff that people were moved by when they came here to North Carolina, like the anatomy of a pig pickin', which they had never experienced a pig pickin' before, so they like painted a pig pickin'. So it's really interesting to see exactly those pops of colors, but they're starting to decay. One of them is like this beautiful tree of life, and then now nature is starting to add to the art, but it's also destroying the art, so they're trying to save it now.
Interesting. So you said that you had heard about this a while ago. How did you hear about it? When did you find it? That kind of stuff. And what is it about this story and this piece of North Carolina history that you really enjoy?
Yeah, well, first of all, the town of Cameron is a very small town, but it's got a lot of history there. I had been there a few times with a beautiful historic building that they were trying to save, and unfortunately that was unable to happen. But I'd been there for that. I didn't realize these barns were right around the corner from me. A lot of them are right off the roadside. They're in clumps, so they're pretty easy to see and explore. And the town welcomes people to come look at them. They want people to come to Cameron and see these barns. And there's lots to do in Cameron, too. So I had heard about them through just research. I do a lot of research of cool things to see in North Carolina. I probably saw them first on Atlas Obscura. And, I just went to go look at them. And when I saw them in person and I saw how big and colorful and cool looking they were, and I heard the story behind them about this, like this prodigal son, right? He had gone to New York and come home with all these people to make this art. It really moved me, and it's very beautiful to see, and it's amazing to see the town try to pull together to save this art now.
And you kind of already touched on this, but obviously people can go for themselves, right? You just kind of wandered up there. You didn't have to set up anything. You can go find these by yourselves.
You can. And I do have a story online, so if you're looking for like an easy way to locate at least one pod of them, that story has that. We did talk to the teacher or the librarian who had helped orchestrate food and water and keeping these artists sheltered and fed and finding them places to stay. And so she had shared a lot of memories, and she showed us some that were even hidden off the beaten path. But you can just drive and go see them. And while you're in Cameron, there are other things to do. I tried to pick locations that it had one really extra cool thing that you could go for, but that you'd still have some other things to do with the family while you're in town.
Okay. So what are some of those things? Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, downtown Cameron is just very interesting and historic in itself. It's got a lot of historic homes and buildings and like an old general store and an old hotel. They're really working on preserving that history. So I would definitely suggest driving through downtown Cameron. If you can, line up your visit with one of their antique fairs. They are known for the antique fairs. They're also known for, I believe it's dewberries. So there's like a festival surrounding that. And then another thing I'd heard about that I want to go back and do is Lazy Fox Lavender Farm. And I saw pictures. It's, first of all, the home is like a beautiful historic home called Edgewood, circa like 1910. There's this beautiful lavender farm, purple, everything you could imagine of this like hazy purple farm, idyllic. It's very visual. They've got a parlor and a store inside. They have tea parties, lavender picking. You can go for a picnic. So seems like a very beautiful place to visit while you're there and line it up with this whole experience. There's also an orchard with apples and peaches and blueberries at James Creek Cider House. They have cornhole and tic-tac-toe, checkers, and picnics. Both of these have very family-friendly things to do. So you'll have lots to do while you're in Cameron.
And again, Cameron's only 45 minutes away from the Triangle, so definitely a day trip. After the break, though, we're going to talk about a place a little bit farther away and a little bit spookier. We'll be back. Welcome back. So, Heather, the other place you mentioned is a ghost town. Tell me about that. And actually, when we say ghost town, what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so a ghost town in general is a place that was once a thriving place where people lived, and now there's just remnants of it. Sometimes the remnants are very visible, like the whole houses are still standing. Some are in various states of decay. Some ghost towns are underwater, and I've done several stories on underwater ghost towns. There's just some structures remaining or just parts of walls. So really, a ghost town can be any of those things. What makes this ghost town so cool is that it's mostly still standing, but it's still kind of starting to decay. So you really get a good visual out there.
And is it haunted?
So I have heard legends that it's haunted. It's called Henry River Mill Village. Mm-hmm. So it's been abandoned for several decades. I want to say at least 50 years. But the town itself is, over 100 years old. And it's a mill village, as the name kind of suggests. But the houses are, these old mill homes, and they're lined up. You really get a sense of what an old mill village would have looked like. And over time, people left and filtered out. Mills kind of became less popular as a place to work as we became more and more technological. And I believe this mill, the actual mill, was destroyed in like fire and storms. And so a lot of mills were lost that way over the decades as well. So people began moving out, and it just became a ghost town. But a lot of it's still standing, including this 2-story store, like a grocery store. And it's got the old vintage signs on it. And you can go inside at least one of the houses. Some you can't go inside. They're too decayed, but you can look in through the windows. There's a lot to explore out there. You can walk all the way down to the mill by the river and see the remnants of it. It's very visually interesting. And yes, there are, of course, legends that it's haunted. Some of the houses are completely overgrown with ivy, so you can barely tell that there's a house under there. So it really gives you a sense of this post-apocalyptic, humanity is gone, and it feels very eerie to be out there.
And people might actually recognize that mill, right? Because it was in the Hunger Games.
Yes.
So when you travel, or when you do these stories, you actually travel to these locations. That's how we get all this great footage. That's obviously how you can sit here and be so energetic in talking about this. Your face really lights up when you talk about these things. So what exactly was all of this like? Did you have a different feeling because it does have that like legendary, maybe being haunted?
So I go to a lot of haunted places, or, theoretically haunted places. When you talk about hidden history, which is what I like to explore, a lot of these places have some sort of tragic stories involved with it. And when you have tragic stories and abandoned places, boom, you get ghost stories. One of the things that struck me about this village was some locals have said that they've seen sightings of a phantom lantern wandering through the village at night. So if you can actually stay overnight, by the way. So you can do more than tour. You can tour this place, and you basically buy a ticket. It wasn't that expensive. I feel like it was under $20 when I went. And you literally just get kind of free run to just walk all over this village, by yourself if you want to. It's really cool, and you can stay there. So people have said that they can see an old lantern coming out of one of the houses and going down to the mill and coming back up. Other people have said they see the shadows of horses down by the mill. So if you get chills thinking about it, I actually have goosebumps right now. But if you're staying in one of the mill homes, you can look down to the river, and they say they can see the silhouette of horses and men on horses walking up and down along the river. Others have claimed to hear footsteps or knocks on the doors. And there's one that's really closed up. You really can't get inside, but they'll see a light coming from inside the house. So there's a lot of eerie stories out there.
I am not someone who loves haunted things. That really freaks me out. So other North Carolinians can go and explore this site and then report back to us and let me know if they see any of these things. But I will definitely go during the day to see this.
The daytime is a lot less creepy.
Okay.
They offer plenty of daytime tours where you won't get those eerie feelings, but if you want to, you can stay the night, and they have haunted tours more close to Halloween. So plenty of adventure to be had up at the Henry River Mill Village.
Definitely. And now Hildebrand is a little bit farther away from here. It's 2.5 to 3 hours away from the Triangle. So not really a day trip. I mean, you could do it if you really want, but you can stay there. You can check out many other things there. What else is there to do around there?
Yeah, so you could do it as a day trip. I did. But definitely if you wanted to just go and make an afternoon of it, or a few days of it. It's very close to Hickory. And there's a lot to do in Hickory. Hickory has a ton of history. They've got an aviation museum where they preserve all these really cool old airplanes. They're these old bombers and things like that. I'm not an airplane expert, but they look like something you'd see in World War II. So if you're interested in that, those are really cool looking. They also have the Catawba Science Center, which is in a very old, eerie looking building itself. If you like old buildings, Hickory's got a good amount. Hickory's obviously known for its furniture. There's also a museum of art that looks really amazing out there. There's lots of museums. There's a history museum. There's an arboretum. I love weird trees, or trees that aren't native to North Carolina, or ones that are but that are really old. And then they've got a downtown area that's got all kinds of really amazing local food, sweets, ice cream, plenty more parks, hiking. There's more than enough to spend a day out in that area if you wanted to go to Hickory and maybe stay the night in Hickory and then go see the Henry River Mill Village after that. You could just do it all together.
Lots to do, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate this, and we actually really appreciate you unearthing North Carolina's hidden history. Really interesting stuff that you do in reporting. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you listen to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL News app, you can also find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening.